Let's move on to our second speaker for the day, Mr. Rajesh Srinivasaragavan, founder and CEO, BACUTI. To introduce him, I call upon Mr. R.S. Kumar, Vice Chairman, IAF Chennai Chapter.
Happy morning. I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Rajesh. Mr. Rajesh is an alumnus of IIT Madras, holding an MS in Computer Engineering and an MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management. He began his career as a software engineer at HP and later served as a consultant with McKinsey and Company. His track record for building massive businesses is exceptional. He previously served as the VP of Strategy at Dell Technologies and was a key member of Cisco's corporate strategy team, where he helped a launch of multiple $100 million businesses. Today, he is the founder and CEO of BACUTI, an AI software startup. Through BACUTI, he is helping manufacturing companies tackle one of the greatest challenges of our time, sustainability. By using AI and enterprise data, his work empowers companies to improve their operations and significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Beyond his professional achievements, Rajesh is deeply committed to education and mentorship. He has served as a lecturer at the Wharton West Executive MBA program and continues to mentor the next generation of innovators through the Nirman program at IIT Madras. Mr. Rajesh, the stage is for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. I think we had an opportunity to present at IFEX in Bombay for 5 minutes. So we have 45 minutes, so I'm hopefully be able to cover a little bit more. I think both Nelcast and Snam Alloys, I think both the sponsor are customers to us, so we're delighted to be here. We also work with a few steel and auto component companies. So that's the kind of my background in Foundry. Little bit background about the company. It started by me and Biju. Both of us are classmates from IIT Madras. We've known each other for about 30 years. He's a mechanical engineer. I'm not. I'm more electronics engineer. I think we talked about casting. I think one of the things that I felt IIT Madras did really, really well is in your first year, they actually make you make a mold, pour iron, and actually you make casting. So you actually have done casting in real life in a workshop. So I think I'm proud to have I've done some foundry work to be relevant and presenting here. We come in from an experience of software. So we talk about software in the context of manufacturing. That's the background and that's the context in which I am presenting here. I think during the introduction, we talked about what the company does. The company is using AI to help manufacturing companies improve their operations. And the starting point is around sustainability, how to reduce emissions, and I'll tell you why that is relevant. Right? So that's kind of what we do. And I think specifically we do what is called product carbon footprint reduction. So at the product level, what are your emissions and how do you reduce it? We work a lot with steel and fabrication companies, just a little background. I think apart from the two names I mentioned, we're also in discussion with companies like JSW Steel, ArcelorMittal, Mahindra, etc., around auto components and steel fabrication and how to reduce emissions at the factory and the product level. Today, I think the title of the presentation is, I think, Carbon Compliance Customers. Okay, so that's kind of the focus of this presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today's agenda. Carbon, what is it? Why does it matter for this group? Trends, particularly around regulation and customers, what's changing? I think as Mr. Saman said, I'll pick one example, specifically what we did at Nelcast and what's the learning for the foundry industry. And the last is kind of some takeaway from a foundry industry perspective, what's the future look like? That's the focus of the presentation. Little show of hands, how many of you understand what global warming is? Global warming? Okay. 1, 2, okay. How many of you understand what greenhouse gases are? Okay? How many of you know what net zero means? Okay? How many of you understand what scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions are? Okay, about 10%. I'll maybe take 5 minutes just to set the context, because without that, I think the rest of the presentation doesn't make sense. So it'll be helpful to understand. All of us know Chennai. If you have been in a car with your windows closed, within 5 minutes, you could be dead, okay? Yesterday I was trying to do this. I was trying to take a conference call with the windows shut, and I realized you can really get dehydrated very, very quickly. That is effectively what is happening to the earth. Effectively, the same thing is happening to the earth today. Instead of glasses, you basically have what is called greenhouse gases. And the greenhouse gases could be from carbon dioxide, it could be methane, it could be nitrous oxide, it can be any emissions. Multiple emissions basically is what it's doing is it's creating a protective layer that when the sun heat comes in, it is unable to escape and the earth gets heated up. If it gets heated up, things melt, water level rises, you have floods, you have everything. So Chennai, December, you will have floods in your houses. That's all kind of related to this, right? So that is the simplest problem we are trying to solve. How do we actually reduce the emissions? So what we are trying to do when we say net zeros, we are trying to not add to it. Whatever we have now, let us not make it more difficult. That is what we are trying to do. Now what scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, if you look at accounting, when you look at a bank balance, at the end of the day, you can all put one number. Now, whether the number is income, whether it's fixed cost, whether it's variable cost, it's in the balance sheet, these are all different ways of representing money. Similarly, in greenhouse gases also, in companies, when they talk about emissions of a company, they have different ways of describing what the emissions you are emitting. So in a foundry, let's say you have a coal plant or a diesel generator. You are burning, you are the demand and the supply for the emissions. So you're burning something in your plant. So therefore, that is considered something called scope 1. So you have full control of how much emissions comes out of that activity. So that's considered scope 1. So that is what's called the direct emissions. That's the main emissions. Scope 2 is emissions that come from your consumption of electricity. You cannot tell TNEB or Karnataka Electricity Board whether they use solar, whether they use hydro, you don't know that, okay? All you are doing is consuming units. If I'm consuming 20,000 units today, if I reduce it, I'll reduce my emissions. I cannot control the quality of it. I can only control the quantity. In scope 1, I can control quality and quantity. If I use LPG versus natural gas versus diesel, I can control the quality. Similarly, in scope 2, you control only the quantity. So that is scope 2. These are direct emissions. So when you talk about emissions from a foundry, the more you use energy, whether it's direct, as in fuel, or grid, they contribute to scope 1 and scope 2. The third part is something called scope 3 emissions, where you don't control the emissions, it's your supply chain. So if you are buying an alloy, whatever emissions that person who made the alloy contributed becomes your scope 3. If you are transporting, that person emissions from the transport becomes your emissions. So like that, there are 15 categories. The categories are like upstream and they're downstream. You can read up. I'm not going to spend all the things. This itself might take 2 hours of education. But the key point I want to emphasize is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 are 3 emissions and 3 ways of calculating what your emissions are and what you're responsible for. Today, most companies report at the company level scope 1, scope 2 emissions. Very few companies are looking at scope 3 emissions. Very few companies are looking at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 at the product level, not at the company level. Okay? And that is what is changing in the last 2 years and moving forward. That's what's changing. Can you do detailed, granular accounting and reduction? So if I do the accounting methodology, saying, I have a company report, but can I do cost accounting? Can I do reduction on a week-by-week basis? Can I do supplier management? That is what is changing now. And that's what is kind of happening in the industry. So why do I care about all this? I am Foundry, I am burning something, melting something, I'm making axles, I'm making gear parts, brakes. Why do I care? Right, as Foundry people. Fundamentally, this is what we believe. 40 years ago, quality changed manufacturing. Everywhere, every process. Today, if you ask anyone about manufacturing, quality cannot be separated. It has to be built into the process, right from material, right from design, right from procurement, right? Every part of your business involves quality. We believe sustainability is changing manufacturing the same way. Every part of your business has to incorporate sustainability in its process. And this is, we think, is going to change over the next 40 years. And the way it's showing up is when someone is doing a contract, whether it's Volvo or ZF-RANE or any customer is doing contracts, they're saying, tell me your carbon scores. Lower carbon scores, you get a better chance of winning the contract. It is not just cost, it's around carbon scores. So that is why this is relevant. And this is not just in auto industry, it's happening in chemical industry, it's happening in semiconductor industry, it is happening in every industry. So we believe manufacturing will fundamentally change because of sustainability. A lot of people say, oh, but the geopolitical things, it doesn't seem to be that important. Yes, it is not favorable. US has stepped a little bit away from sustainability. The war has made a little pressure on sustainability. But if you look at the recent EU-India agreement, which happened about a month and a half ago, which has happened after the Trump election, after a lot of these things, EU did not they did not move back from sustainability. They kept their ground. They said, we still want companies and countries to reduce sustainability. So they said, India, we will help you, but we will not reduce the target. We are not going to let people take a free pass. So there is no get out of jail on this. This is going to happen and going to happen in the next 10 years. I'll give you two specific examples of how it's hitting companies today. One is regulations are changing. Second is customers are changing and they are incorporating in sustainability into their process. And I'll tell you how it is so that it affects your business. Any questions so far? Feel free to if you have a question or two, feel free to raise your hands. Correct. So electricity, so to your question, electricity from the grid is scope 2. Okay? Today, diesel is scope 1. Okay? Now, if I'm a customer, let's say I'm an Elcast or Ashok Leyland or anyone, if I buy solar and I put up solar in my factory, I put the panels and consume it, it will reduce my energy consumption from the grid. So the quantity will go down in terms of my scope 2 because I'm producing and consuming it. Now, if I do a power purchase agreement where I am not building the thing, but I'm doing it with a third party, what happens is my quality of energy comes down. So for example, in Tamil Nadu, if I actually tap the energy grid today, it has a mix of coal and hydel and solar. So they have a number. Every quarter, Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry, each grid, they produce a number. They say for every unit consumed, you are producing about 0.78 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Now, if I buy, let's say instead of 100 units from the grid, I buy 20 units from power purchase agreement and 80 units from the grid. That 0.7 for the 100 units now will be applied only on the 80 units. And for the 20 units, because it's solar, it becomes 0. So 0.7 times 170 will go down to 0.7 times 80, which is 56. So you will see a 14% reduction if you shift your energy from to PPA in the solar. So this is how you reduce. So similarly, you can also change your materials. You can change your suppliers. If you use electric vehicles for logistics, you will reduce the emissions. So these are all different ways to reduce your emissions because you're trying to reduce both the quality and the quantity. right? So I'll give you another example on the logistics side. If you move from road transportation to ship transportation, see, ship is efficient by almost 20x from an emissions perspective. From here to Bombay, Chennai to Bombay, by ship is almost 20x more efficient from an emissions perspective than by road, just to give an example, right? So hydel is considered zero, right? Hydel, solar, nuclear is considered very low, right? So, but you are not going to set up a Bakaranangal plant, right? But Tamil Nadu government has to do it, right? So, or the Karnataka government has to do it. So, if they have more hydel, then the grid efficiency will improve, right? So that is what, but the thing that you have control on is trying to do power purchase agreement. If you do power purchase agreement for wind farm or power purchase agreement for solar, these all have zero emissions. The same thing from a coal plant or diesel generator has a much higher emissions, right? Let me come back to why this matters, right? So from a regulatory perspective, there are lots and lots and lots of laws that are coming out around emissions reporting and reduction. I will pick a few. So there are two in India that is important. One is called BRSR. Right now it is focused on, I think, about top 2,000 companies of India, where they have to report company level emissions. Now there's a new guideline called GEI. This is not for every company. They have targeted about, I would say, 200 to 300 companies and about 1,000 to 2,000 plants. So fluoroalkali plants, simil plants, aluminum plants, it's at a plant level. Now the government is saying you're going to have targets for reduction. If you are a plant making fluoroalkali in a particular plant, let's say in Indore, today your emissions, let's say, is 5,000 tons. The government is saying next year you have to reduce 5%. If you reduce, great. If you reduce more than 5%, 6%, 7%, you can sell that to someone who's not reducing. That 2%, you can sell it off as a credit and get some money for it. If you reduce only 2% or 3%, either you pay a penalty or you have to buy it from someone else. So the government is starting to set targets at the plant level for emissions and reduction over the next 4 or 5 years. And this is how they are driving it. They are starting with the industries that are most polluting. Coal, steel, aluminum, that's where they're starting. But it's slowly expanding. The second one, because a lot of people here export and export to Europe, that is important, is something called CBAM. I will talk about that CBAM in a bit. There are other rules everywhere, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but these are the two. BRSR and CBAM are the two things that I want to focus on. CBAM, what is it? Simplest thing is it's a tax. It's a tax, but tax for the importer. Okay? Let's say I'm exporting 1 ton of material. Okay? If I'm exporting 1 ton of material. And in the casting industry, forging industry, production of that 1 ton emits about 2 tons of carbon dioxide, approximately 2, 2.5, depending on your technology, etc. 2 to 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton of production. Today, each ton of carbon dioxide is about $90 in the European trading system. So you can actually look at the rates. It's like dollar US India currency exchange. Every day it changes. Okay, in India right now is 93 rupees. It was 85 rupees 6 months ago. So the value of carbon changes every day. But right now it's about $90 per ton. So if I'm exporting 1 ton, that's equivalent to $90. If I'm exporting 10 tons, that's $900. If I'm exporting 10,000 tons, you can do the math. Okay? Basically, that is what is happening. And that tax is paid by the importer. Okay? So right now, this tax is on 6 sectors. Steel, aluminum, cement, electricity, hydrogen, and fertilizers. Steel is the one that's kind of mostly impacted right now. And this is tied to specific HSN codes, which is the shipping code that is used by customs, right? So it's specifically tied to that. The reporting already started October 2023. No penalties. The penalties were supposed to start this year. They have pushed it out 1 year. I think people asked for some help, they needed time, so it's not yet started. They pushed it out a little bit. This one includes scope 3. So far, no other regulation included scope 3. This one included scope 3. And there is significant penalties if you do not meet this. The penalties can be as significant as you cannot even ship to Europe. Your business will be shut down if you do not do the reporting. That is as bad as that. It's like customs clearance. If you don't do customs clearance, you can't get it out of the port. Similarly, if you don't file the necessary paperwork, you can't get it out of the port, right? And this is at the product level, not at the company level, okay? So if you have 10 products, focus on only the 10 products you export. You have 200 products, don't worry about the other remaining things you're not exporting, right? In 2028, this is expected to expand to another 180 categories. Right now, it's 6. It's expected to 800. How is it going to show up for you? Right? Today, let's say you are exporting and you are selling at, say, $50 for your part. Okay? Your customer, your competitor is at $54. Let's say he's sitting in Finland or Italy. He's inside Europe. He's not outside Europe. With CBAM tax, your landed cost, because the importer is paying, right? So if I'm shipping to Volvo, Volvo is paying this number. Okay, this $8 is paid by Volvo. His landed cost is going to be $58 for a part from India, compared to $54 for a part from Finland. You'll say this doesn't make sense. This is like tariff and this is like protectionist and all. This is not free market. You can argue all of this, right? But you can debate depending on whether glass is half full or glass is half empty. The people who think this glass half empty say this is protectionist, this is bad, this is not free market, right? You're not. The glass half full argument is, they say in Europe the last 20 years, every company has gone green. They have made significant investments in green. Now you are sitting in Indonesia or Thailand or China or India, and you are hiding away and you are burning and polluting the environment. I'm getting affected. So now you have to level the playing field. So this is the glass half full argument. I'm not here to debate whether it is empty or half full or empty or full. The point is this is a reality. So if you have this tax, either your price realization has to go down $4 to be competitive or more, or you have to reduce this number. These are only two things. Either it's going to hit your revenue, or you have to make improvements. So these are the only two options that are available. The one thing that changed about 3 months ago is they introduced, so people said, oh, this calculation is very complex, it's very difficult and all that, right? One of the things they do is, okay, fine, we will give you a default value. Okay, so if you don't want to do calculation, we'll do default value. I'll tell you what happens if you use default value, okay? So you are a foundry or you're a forging company or a casting company, you're buying steel, let's say from JSW or SAIL or something. If you don't have the actual values from the company, the default value is about 4.2 ton per ton, okay? Actually, if you look at it, the reality might be 2, but the value they associate default value is 4.2, okay? Now if I'm exporting about 10,000 tons a year, if I use the default value, I am incurring a cost of about 34 crores. If I use the actual value, this number is closer to 16 crores. It's about 18 crore difference for a 10,000 ton per year, right? I'm assuming about 150 rupees per kg. If you are an export business, someone who's making 15% now is making 0% or negative. If you use default, you still make money, okay? So the thing is, what you want to do is you get actual data from your supplier. So you're a foundry person, you're buying iron from JSW, or you're buying some scrap material, you want to get actual data. The more your supply chain contributes, the better it is, right? This is a problem, this is not unique to the foundry industry. This is a problem with even like EEPC, right? The entire engineering industry has surfaced it. We're talking to Mr. Chadda, who is the chairman of EEPC, trying to see how we can get it broadly in the industry. So this is the problem we're encountering. So what do you do, right? What you can do is, A, try to get to actual values and help with your supply chain partners to get this at the actual value so that your reporting can be reduced. Number 2, operationally, you do improvements to reduce emissions. These are the 2 things that you can do. We talked about regulation. I will talk about what's changing in the customers, right? And I think, I don't know many of you, but we have heard multiple customers, not just European customers, but Indian customers, Mahindra, European customers like ZF, Volvo, right? Who are saying in their procurement, in their RFP, in their RFIs, they are asking for carbon footprint scores, right? I'll give you 3 specific examples from companies that we have seen, right? Large auto components, they're asking from their supply chain. And this is like, I'll give you a very specific example someone told us, right? So this is in the chemical industry. They are saying, I'm going to buy from supplier A and supplier B, right? So they're saying your emissions is $32, your emissions cost is $28, okay? You have 2 choices. I'm going to put numbers to this carbon account because they do the same $90 calculation and say, okay, you are supply. If you reduce it, I will buy from it. If you reduce carbon emissions, I'll buy from you. Or you cut down your price to be competitive. Okay? So this is getting in RFPs written into contracts. This you can do if you're commodity buying, right? So if I'm saying, oh, this is same as that, right? Now think of it, some of these you'll say, oh, I've built into the design, big deal, it's not problem, no one is going to change me, like, oh, how hard is it going to be someone to change my part, and like, Ashok Leyland will take 5 years to redesign their car, I can't do any changing, right? What they do is, this is JLR told us, right? Jaguar Land Rover told us, this is what they're doing in their contracts. They'll say, fine, your emissions today are 32,000 tons. I want you to commit to a reduction of 20% in 5 years. If you do not, I'm going to write clawback penalties in the contract. Okay? So this is contractual with financial implications. This is what's happening. Sourcing is getting integrated with sustainability. This was not happening 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It's happening now. The second thing that's happening is most of the people who did sustainability, this is an example from ArcelorMittal. They thought it's nice, okay? But now they are actually seeing necessity. And I'll give you an example what ArcelorMittal is trying to do. ArcelorMittal supplies steel to Audi. Okay? And Audi is telling them, for A7 cars in France, I want green steel. A7 Audi car in France is maybe 3% of Audi's revenue or 5% of Audi's revenue. But I'm willing to pay 20% premium for that. So ArcelorMittal wants to supply green steel for that product. It's not a big number, but 20% revenue premium on that product for a steel industry that makes 3 to 5% of profit is pretty significant. So ArcelorMittal is saying, I want to change my entire operations so that I can tell exactly which lot, what my emissions are. Lot level emissions at the operational level. This is not once a year, end of the year I do taxing. This is not once a year I call an accountant and do it. I want to know every quarter, every week, every month, lot level, what is happening, what's my emissions. That's the thing that's happening at ArcelorMittal, as an example. This is another company, I don't know if you know this, Lone Star is a little, I think they have a plant in Chennai. There's a little bit smaller company, about $1 billion company. They're about 13 plants worldwide. They make fasteners and nuts and bolts. A little smaller company, more similar. They are, most people consider mid-market company, right? So it's not a big company. This is not a big company problem. This is medium-sized company, small company. Most people here in this room is probably in this size. So they are investing in solutions now. So this is happening not just at the top of the pyramid, it's happening down below. Any questions? So UK is not part of EU, right? Therefore, but they are trying to do the same things that you copied. But they don't want to invent something new because the idea, the philosophy is all different. But the laws in EU does not apply immediately, or you have to pass a law separately in UK. So there is like 90% overlap in terms of the ideas and technology and all, like the laws. But legally, they are different. EU CBAM is different from UK law. I don't even know if it's called CBAM, but it is like CBAM. It's the same idea. I think people talked about AI. I think this is important to understand why this is, right? Because AI, in my opinion, it's changing things so dramatically. Even we as a company, we are like 5%, 6%, very small company. How we do things are different, right? And I have lived through the internet age in the 97, 98. I thought that was life-changing. I think this is a lot more life-changing. I think a lot of jobs are going to get rewritten, right? I think this is overall, I think people are talking about economic impact that is pretty significant. And I'll connect it back to why this is relevant in the foundry industry, right? But the reason is this is so dramatic in terms of what's happening and what's changing. And we can have over lunch talk a little bit about that in more detail. There are some things, problems that haven't been solved for 50 years are getting solved by AI, right? Don't ask me how. I still haven't, I think I did my bachelor's work in neural networks and AI, but I don't think I understand all the kind of how this is happening. But it is solving things which are hard for humans for 50 years, right? It is doing things on its own, writing code on its own, hacking systems on its own, right? I think fundamentally, and I think everyone who's at least touching this will say it's probably one of the most fundamental shifts that's happening in this, like the level of steam engine, the level of printing press. That's the kind of effect that we are talking about, right? I'll tell you why this is relevant, right, in a bit, and we'll connect it back to. So let me kind of talk a little bit about the case study, what we did, what are the learnings for the foundry, right? So we have worked with Nelcast for about almost 1.5 years now. We have deployed our software for them. I think, as you probably know, that there are about 100 products, about 3 plants, right, about 500 plus suppliers. We are deeply integrated into their SAP system. And when I say deeply integrated, we just take data from their SAP system. We kind of, they didn't have to do, hopefully, much work. So, and this was, a lot of people get scared away from this. This takes 9 months, 1 year. No, it didn't take 9 months, 1 year. It took us like 3 days with AI, right? So technically, this is a problem that's very, very easy to solve with AI. Today, they can tell the emissions like with 2 weeks delay at the plant level, at the product level, right? They can generate customer-ready reports for all the 100 products like right now, real time, right? And this is where AI is coming in. I can give ideas around how to improve it. So yesterday, last week, we were actually at their plant. Actually, this week, we were at their offices. And Mr. Shivkumar, who's the CFO, said, and this LPG problem was front and center 2 days ago. He said, like, if I moved from LPG to electricity for drying sand, what is the impact of emissions? And AI was able to generate the answer like within 2 minutes, right? They had 3 plants. They said, in this plant, do this because it's actually better, but these 2 plants don't this because it's not efficient, right? That level of insight takes, I think, probably an expert 3-4 weeks who understands operations deeply, and AI is able to do that, right? So this is what we have done with them. There are kind of 6 key lessons from what we have done with them. We've used software on their foundry data. One is yield is a key driver of emissions, and lot of operators here know the operations inside out. Okay, they know it very, very well. And if you told me this product has a 50% yield, you know this product has a 98% yield, you know that detail. And in foundry, the way we know it is that if there's a yield loss, the mold is complex or something, it gets broken and then put back, melted again, right? That's what you do in a simple foundry. The thing is, from a material perspective, there's very little loss because you're reusing it. But an emissions perspective, you're heating the same thing twice. If you have a 50% yield, you're doing it twice. That doubles the emission associated with that, right? This, our AI was able to discover. They didn't tell us the yield by product. They didn't share. Our system was able to discover that the yield was different for different products, and this is why the emissions were there. They were very surprised. If you look at some of the numbers, there was like a 4x difference between one product and another on a per ton basis. I'm like, why is that difference? When we looked at it, yield was a factor, right? So one of the drivers of emissions from a foundry perspective is yield is a big driver of emissions for you from a foundry perspective. The second learning is sourcing matters, right? So I'll give you approximate. So if you say you're making 1 ton of product today, about for each ton of product, the emissions is about 2 tons of carbon dioxide, approximately, right? 35 to 40% is scope 1, scope 2. The remaining is scope 3, right? Which is basically about 1.2 is scope 3 for every ton. And if you look at scope 3, 90% of that 1.2 is from materials. Okay? And materials is the primary contribution. In foundry, 50% of that is steel, approximately. So for the 2.1, if you look at it, 0.5 to 0.6 comes from steel. Now if you use pig iron, for every ton of pig iron, that number is about 2.5 to 2.6. If you use scrap, that number, what I call pre-consumer scrap, that number is 0.7. If I use post-consumer scrap, it's 0. Okay? So if I move from I can move from 2.1 to 1.5 by shifting to post-consumer scrap. Okay? So this is a significant sourcing advantage. But the challenge is, do we have enough scrap in the market to buy, right? Now, if as a foundry person, from a sourcing perspective, you have to think about what's the implication of that. Can I lock in supply, right? How much lock in? And maybe you just want to lock in supply for your export markets, not necessarily for everything, right? So if you're exporting only 10%, you need to lock in only supply for 10%. So this is the second implication. The third implication, I gave you a little preview of that in terms of primary data. So getting it from, say, JSW Steel. In this case, I'll give you, if you're buying alloys, right? So SNAM Alloys is a sponsor, they are here, right? So ferro alloys is one of the inputs into the emissions. The average number for ferro alloys approximately is about 4.4 ton per ton, right? Just an order of magnitude. If I went and said average, I don't know how it's produced, I don't know where it's produced. But if I make the ferro alloy and I actually look at it, that 4.4 number actually can be as low as 3 or can be as high as 7, depending on whether you're using induction furnace or arc furnace, what's your utilization. So there's a wide variation in terms of action. So if you are a foundry company buying alloys, you want to actually try to get to the primary data and find suppliers who have the lowest emission. If you have an electric arc furnace that's using green energy versus regular energy, emissions are different, right? So all these effects. So if you want to reduce your 2.1 to 1.5 to 1 to 1.7, this is how you do it. Improve yield, think about scrap, work with kind of primary suppliers like alloy manufacturers to actually reduce it. Logistics is another area, right? In some cases, logistics, you may not have a lot of control around what your emissions are like. For example, if I'm shipping from Pondicherry to, I don't know, Indore, you have to do truck. I cannot do sea, right? But maybe there are some sea routes. As I told you, the example is it can actually be very efficient to do sea. But you need a little bit of planning ahead of time, right? Yeah, whether you use internal vehicles, whether you use trucks which are diesel versus EV, that affects it. So logistics is another area to actually do. The other two lessons, this is around visibility. Today, you actually, most people do is after the fact they do emissions. It's like saying like March 31st, after March 31st, let me look at the tax numbers and do it. Oops, I forgot to do life insurance. I forgot to do ATCC. I forgot to do this, right? You can't do anything after March 31st, right? You have to do it beforehand, right? Real-time visibility gives you the opportunity to do it real-time, right? If you knew in July your emissions are like this, then you can make changes in August, September, October, so that by December it's actually lower, This is not there in the world today. This capability is one of the gaps in this thing, and I think the more visibility you have, as I said, more it becomes integrated with your operation, it becomes better. The last one is, this is not just an operations problem, this is a revenue problem. If you are a greener product, we have seen examples that people say they can command up to 20% premium if the product is more green in the market, right? 20% revenue premium is pretty significant, okay? So if we can, it may not be true. This is ArcelorMittal is saying, I can sell 20% premium green steel to Audi, right? And this is not just in the steel industry. This is in every industry. If you actually have a differentiated green product, you can sell it at a premium. So think of it not just as a cost thing, think of it as a revenue thing. So I have two small videos to kind of close off and give you an example, and this is a little bit of a demo of the product. This is for a steel company. This is a dummy steel company. There's no confidential data in this, right? This is a little bit of what our product system looks like. You can see the emission scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 broken up, and you can generate reports. It gives you your suppliers and all that. And I'm going to do a 1-minute video of what we can do with AI on this, right? Look at the bottom of the screen. So you will see, basically, I'm going to start asking questions to the AI system around what you can do. If you can't see it, I'll read it out for you. So it says, can you analyze scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions and its drivers? And I have access to the operational data, the SAP data, everything that's connected. And you will see it's actually quite powerful. It'll tell you literally what's causing the problem and what you can do to reduce it, right? It tells you what are the things that are causing it, what can you do about it, right? So how to reduce it, right? It gives you the breakdown, things like that, right? So this is like within like connecting the data to your system within 2 weeks, you are able to actually do operational decisions. This is operational questions. This is not accounting questions. These are operational questions, right? 1 more minute. The second one, I think I talked about the LPG example, right? So I think someone asked this question. So this is an LPG example, right? So in this case, it's not LPG, but more natural gas, because this company did not have LPG. They used natural gas. I said, how much of my emissions will reduce if I switch from natural gas to electricity, right? I don't have to worry about how the data is stored. I don't have to worry about what field. I don't need an IT person to do any of this. I'm able to do this. I'm able to ask the question from the data that is there in the system, and anyone can, and ask this question, and it actually gives you an answer pretty quickly, right? So it will look at all your usage, calculate the impact of switching, and then actually make any recommendations. So it's actually quite perceptive in realizing that natural gas is used only in a small portion. So it's saying like, look, it says if you do it, if you do it, it'll be 60%, but I don't think you can see it very well. But it's only 0.43% of your total consumption. So it's not going to move the needle very much. There's no point trying to do this, right? It's able to tell you that. That level of insight, which is, people come back and say, sir, it'll reduce 60%. But 60% of what baseline? The baseline. So it's actually giving you that level of insight. And you can, the more you use it, the better it gets, right? So that's a little bit of what we are. So let me kind of summarize and take a few things, right? So I genuinely believe that AI will change manufacturing, and that's kind of the tie back. And where it will change is data collection, integration. People used to dread connecting to SAP, and actually, oh, it'll be a 1-year project. I have to hire consultants, and it'll take forever, and I'll spend 3 months trying to do this, that. That process is come down very, 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 very fast, right? A lot of report generation has become CBAM report, suddenly BRSR. You have new reports. All this can be generated like quickly. You don't need an army of consultants to do that, right? Spreadsheets actually become, in my opinion, redundant, right? It starts becoming redundant. You don't have to maintain spreadsheets. Oh, what did I tell them last month? What did I tell them this month? All of that is going to go. Finally, most importantly, I'm actually going to be able to reduce emissions. This is not just about reporting. It's about reducing emissions. And one of the things that we are seeing is it's not that emissions improvement, it's operational improvement. It's not just about carbon emissions, it's about can I do better routing, can I do better planning, can I do things like that. That's what I think AI is starting to do in manufacturing. And we're happy to any of you want to work with us, happy to do that. We are based out of Chennai. We have a team out of IITM Research Park and work with customers globally. Happy to do that. Why care about it? I think there are 3 things. One is on the revenue side. There's one around cost side, and others on the risk side. I think from our point of view, these are the 3 things that we see as a benefit for companies working with us. Any questions?
Sorry to cut. Since we are running a little short of time, we will take all questions to the lunch. Yeah? Okay.
Any questions? Either I was super clear or I was...
We have one in the back. Mike?
So let me repeat the question. One is, does CBAM require scope 3? And number 2, where are we getting the emissions factors from, right? So CBAM does require scope 3. And the definition of scope 3 is that what is included, what's not included is slightly different. But our software knows the difference and it takes care of it. Certain things, for example, logistics is not included, as an example. So when I talk about emissions factors, so that people understand what emission factors are, I said like the grid is 0.7, right? So, or 4.4 for ferroalloys. These are numbers that are average numbers per ton. So there are publicly available sources. For CBAM, for example, publishes this list for themselves. There is World Steel has a list that's published. In the chemical industry, there's a list that's published. So these are publicly available data sources that we actually are incorporated in our system. So when we use our system, we actually, you can track and say, I use this number. So for example, in India, you actually can get every quarter the emissions factor of each grid, right? So Tamil Nadu, Andhra, even Andhra also there's different grids. You can get to the plant level. That's published on a quarterly basis. So we get that information on a quarterly basis, incorporate that, and we have a track record of it. So if someone does an audit, you can actually look at that.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. One more question?
See, if I ask you to come and survey my company, normally how much time it takes for you? I know about CBAM and all, but how much time it will take for you to say this will work?
So we tried to do it in less than 2 weeks. Okay, so, and for the entire company, and we are not a consultant, so we are a software company. So the idea is that we do it for 2 weeks. Next 5-10 years, it will be automatically set up. And when I say 2 weeks, typically what we ask for is whatever standard reports that you have, SAP or ERP reports, production schedule, bill of materials, things like that, standard reports that you run your business. If you give us the current information, we will ingest and within 2 weeks, and we want to get that to 1 day, but right now I think we are doing it about 2 weeks. And that's
okay, but how do you charge? It is a same cost for any company, or big company means more money like that? We
charge per plant. So the question was how do we charge? We charge per plant. So we charge per plant. If you make 5 products, 50 products, 100 products in a plant, we don't care, we charge per plant. If you have 13 plants, we'll charge 13 plants. Right? That's basically what we do. And we want you to use it. We don't charge per user, we don't charge per report. We want to use you, we want you to use it as much. We don't charge maintenance, we don't charge any kind of overhead like implementation charges, things like that. It's a cloud-based software. that way. It's like using Office 365 or like Zoho or anything like that, Salesforce. So I know in the interest of time, I'll probably take questions after it. So thank you again.
Thanks to Mr. Rajesh. Actually, all other speakers, we were discussing about them almost couple of months. Just I spoke to him last Saturday. He is here and then briefed about the CBAM. Thank you, sir, again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to call upon Mr. P. Venkatesan, past chairman, IIF Chennai chapter, to felicitate our speaker, Mr. Rajesh, with the traditional Angavastram and a memento. Thank you, sir. I request Venkatesan sir to please stay on stage. The next lucky dip is now being taken. 64, yes, we have a winner. Your name, sir? Guru Raghavendran. Sir is lucky today and present in the hall. Thank you, gentlemen.